The sun had barely risen, casting a warm glow through our bedroom window as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. It had been 6 months since Emily and I had been intimate. 6 long months of silence, where the space between us felt more like a chasm than the comfortable gap we once shared. I remember the day it all started, how her laughter, once so infectious, had turned brittle, her smiles forced and hollow. Every morning, I woke up with a mix of hope and resignation. Hope that today might be different, that maybe she'd reach out, that the distance would close. Resignation that another day would pass without the warmth of her touch. I took pride in being the anchor of our family, working tirelessly to provide and protect the hearth we had built together. But lately, even that sense of purpose felt undermined by the growing tension at home. Emily had always been strong-willed, but lately, her behavior had become unbearable. She snapped at me over the smallest things, lied about where she was going, and treated me with a coldness that was hard to bear. It wasn't just the lack of intimacy, it was the way she dismissed my feelings, calling me overly sensitive or imagining problems that weren't there. Her boorish remarks cut deeper than any argument could. I remember the evening I found her packing a bag. "Where are you going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up, eyes flashing. "I need some space," she snapped, slamming the suitcase shut. It wasn't the first time she'd made such a statement, but this time felt different, more final. The trust we had built seemed to crumble before my eyes. Emotionally, I was a whirlwind of confusion and determination. I loved Emily deeply, and the thought of losing her was unbearable. Yet, her constant rebuffs made me question what I was doing wrong. Was I not enough? Did she no longer see the man she married? These questions haunted me, keeping me awake at night. Despite everything, I remained confident in my role as the protector of our family hearth. I believed that love and commitment could overcome any obstacle, no matter how daunting. But lately, that belief was being tested in ways I never imagined. The stability I provided felt like it was slipping through my fingers, and I couldn't help but fear what the future held for us. One morning, as I sipped my coffee in the kitchen, Emily walked in with a determined look on her face. "I've been thinking," she began, her tone uncharacteristically serious. "I want a baby." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. After months of rejection, this sudden declaration was both surprising and alarming. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. This was the first twist in a story I had no idea how to navigate. The room seemed to shrink around me as Emily's words hung in the air. "I want a baby." It was as if the ground had shifted beneath my feet. I took another sip of coffee, trying to process the sudden declaration. After months of emotional distance and refusal of intimacy, this felt like an unexpected curveball. "Emily," I began slowly, searching her face for any sign of jest. "Are you sure about this? We've barely connected lately. How is this the right time?" She crossed her arms, her expression unwavering. "I've thought about it a lot. Maybe having a baby will bring us closer. Or maybe it'll highlight our issues, but either way, we need to know where we stand." I felt a surge of frustration mixed with concern. "You could have talked to me about how you're feeling instead of shutting me out. Lying about where you were going, snapping at me, it only made things worse." Emily's eyes narrowed. "Maybe if you weren't so controlling, I wouldn't feel the need to push me away. Maybe then we could actually have a normal relationship." Her words stung, echoing the silent accusations that had plagued our marriage for months. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "I'm trying, Emily. I want to fix this, but I need you to meet me halfway." She shook her head, the frustration evident in her posture. "I can't keep living like this, waiting for things to change on their own. Whether it's for better or worse, having a baby will force us to confront what's happening." As the weight of her decision settled in, I felt a mixture of dread and determination. A child would undeniably change the dynamics between us, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was yet another of Emily's impulsive moves to gain control. Still, I couldn't ignore the possibility of rebuilding our relationship for the sake of a family. That night, sleep eluded me. My mind raced with questions and fears. What if Emily was right? What if a baby was the catalyst we needed to either mend our fractured bond or tear it apart completely? I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with the uncertainty that now loomed over our marriage. In the days that followed, Emily's demeanor only seemed to grow more erratic. She oscillated between moments of tenderness and bouts of cruelty, leaving me unsure of where I stood. I tried to initiate conversations, to bridge the gap between us, but each attempt was met with resistance or outright hostility. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Emily brought up the topic again. "I've been researching fertility treatments. I think we should start looking into options." I nodded, hiding the turmoil inside. "All right. Let's explore our options together." But as the weeks passed, it became clear that Emily's intentions were not entirely transparent. She began spending more time with a coworker, often staying late under the guise of work. When I confronted her about it, she dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand. "You're being paranoid. It's just work." The trust that had been eroding between us reached a breaking point. I found myself questioning not only her motives, but also my own worthiness as a husband. Was I truly not enough? Or was Emily's behavior indicative of deeper issues that a baby couldn't fix? Amidst the chaos, I clung to my role as the protector of our family hearth. I took on extra shifts, hoped that increased stability would soothe the growing tensions at home. Yet, every effort seemed to backfire, pushing Emily further away. One night, as I returned home early from work, I found Emily in our bedroom, packing clothes hurriedly. My heart sank. "Where are you going this time?" I demanded, the frustration bubbling to the surface. She looked up, her eyes cold. "I'm taking the kids to stay with my sister for a while. I need some space." The finality in her tone left no room for negotiation. As I watched her gather her things, a deep sense of loss washed over me. The man I had been for so long, the confident, protective husband, now felt powerless against the unraveling of the life we had built together. I stood there in the dimly lit room, grappling with the reality that the foundation of our marriage was crumbling. The path ahead was unclear, fraught with uncertainty and emotional turmoil. But deep down, a flicker of hope remained. If there was a chance to salvage what we once had, I was determined to fight for it, no matter the obstacles. The days that followed Emily's abrupt departure were a blur of worry and determination. I couldn't shake the image of her packing our children's belongings, her movements sharp and hurried. Every ring of the phone sent my heart racing, hoping it was her ready to talk, only to be met with silence or terse messages. Determined to bridge the widening gap, I decided to take action. I reached out to her sister, hoping to understand what was truly going on. The conversation was strained. Emily's sister seemed guarded, offering only vague reassurances. "She's going through a lot," she said, avoiding eye contact. "Just give her some time." Frustration bubbled within me. Time wasn't just passing. It felt like we were slipping apart, each moment stretching longer than the last. I threw myself deeper into my work, believing that providing stability would help mend our fractured relationship. But no matter how many hours I clocked in, the emptiness at home remained. One evening, I returned home to find Emily sitting alone in the living room, her posture tense. The children were asleep upstairs, their soft breaths a stark contrast to the heaviness in the air. I approached her cautiously, hoping to initiate a conversation. "Can we talk?" I asked gently, taking a seat beside her. She glanced at me, her expression guarded. "There's nothing to talk about," she replied curtly, turning her gaze back to the television screen. I felt a pang of hurt, but refused to back down. "Emily, please. I want to understand what's happening. We can work through this together." Her sigh was exasperated. "You never listen. Always so focused on work and providing. But what about us? What about our needs?" Her words hit me hard. She was accusing me of neglecting our relationship, of being too absorbed in my role as the provider to notice her pain. It was a painful truth I had been avoiding, buried beneath my responsibilities. "I've been trying," I countered, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I thought keeping everything stable would help us. Maybe I was wrong." She looked away, her frustration evident. "Maybe you need to see that your way isn't the only way. Maybe having a baby is the push we need to realize that." The mention of a baby reignited the storm within me. After months of denied intimacy, her sudden desire for a child felt like a last-ditch effort to salvage something that seemed irreparably broken. I struggled to maintain my composure, the weight of her expectations pressing down on me. That night, sleep eluded me once more. I wandered the halls of our empty house, the silence amplifying my thoughts. Was I truly failing as a husband and father? The doubt gnawed at me, threatening to undermine the confidence I had always prided myself on. In the following days, Emily's behavior became increasingly unpredictable. She alternated between moments of unexpected tenderness and sudden bouts of coldness. One morning, she brought breakfast in bed, a small gesture that seemed almost foreign given our recent strife. But just as quickly, she would revert to her distant self, leaving me unsure of where I stood. I tried to seize these fleeting moments of warmth, holding on to them as signs that our marriage wasn't beyond repair. Yet, each gesture was followed by another sharp edge of her frustration, making it clear that her emotions were a volatile mix of hope and resentment. Then came the unexpected twist, a financial crisis at work. My company faced unforeseen challenges, and layoffs were imminent. As the breadwinner, the pressure mounted. I found myself torn between securing our family's future and addressing the growing instability at home. The stress was suffocating, feeding into the tension that already simmered between Emily and me. One late evening, as I reviewed the company's bleak projections, Emily entered the room without knocking. Her presence was unanticipated, and the air seemed to thicken with unspoken words. "We need to talk," she stated firmly, taking a seat across from me. I looked up, meeting her gaze. "I know things are tough, both here and at work. Let's figure this out together." She shook her head, a mix of sorrow and frustration in her eyes. "It's not just about finances. It's about us. I don't know if a baby is the right step right now. Maybe we need counseling." The suggestion was a blow. Counseling meant admitting that our marriage was failing, that our efforts to reconnect had fallen short. I wanted to protest, to assert that I was doing everything in my power to protect and provide, but the exhaustion in her voice silenced me. "I agree," I finally said, the fight draining out of me. "If that's what you think is best." As she left the room, I was left with a profound sense of helplessness. The man I saw myself as, the confident, protective husband, now felt adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Every decision seemed to carry the weight of our fractured relationship, each choice a potential catalyst for further discord. Yet, amidst the chaos, a small ember of hope remained. I couldn't abandon the family we had built, not without fighting for it. Determined to reclaim the harmony we once knew, I began to seek out solutions, reaching out to friends and professionals for guidance. The path forward was unclear, but giving up wasn't an option. I owed it to myself, to Emily, and to our children to try, no matter how steep the climb. It had been weeks since Emily suggested counseling, and yet every time I tried to bring it up, she deflected or shut me down with an excuse. I could see the walls getting higher, pushing me further away, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was slipping from my grasp. The moments when we would talk and I thought things were improving always seemed to end in the same place, her walking away, emotionally distant, as if she had made a decision I wasn't privy to. The tension at home was unbearable. It felt like we were both walking on eggshells, unsure of what would trigger the next argument or, worse, the next silent treatment. Our children, who had once been a source of joy and laughter, now looked at us with confusion. They could sense the unease in the air, the absence of the warmth that should have filled our home. Then came the day that shattered the fragile peace I had been clinging to. It started as any normal morning, but there was something off in the air, a heaviness that I couldn't ignore. As I prepared breakfast, I overheard Emily on the phone in the other room. Her tone was sharp, and from what I could catch, she was arguing with someone. I didn't recognize the voice on the other end, but I knew it wasn't a family member. It was someone she had been talking to more and more, someone she had become strangely close to over the past few weeks. My heart sank. When she hung up, I asked casually, "Who was that?" Her response was immediate but defensive. "Just a friend." "Why do you always have to be so nosy? Can I have some space for once?" I felt my blood pressure rise, the sting of her words sharp. I wasn't being nosy. I was trying to understand where the hell things had gone wrong. I wanted to know who this friend was and why she had become such a fixture in her life, replacing the man she had once sworn her loyalty to. "Emily, we're not doing this again," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You've been distant, cold, and now you're hiding things from me. If we're going to fix this, we need honesty." She threw her hands up in exasperation. "Oh, now you want honesty? After everything you've done, after how you've made me feel, now you want me to lay everything out for you?" The words hit like a slap to the face. I had always been a loving husband, never shirking my responsibilities, never turning my back on her or our family. But in her eyes, I was the one at fault, the one who had failed her. I tried to keep my composure, but I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. Not at her, but at the situation. At how everything we had built was slipping through my fingers. "We're both to blame, Emily," I said, my voice lower now. "But I'm still here. I'm still trying. Are you?" Her expression softened for a moment, but only for a second. "I don't know if I can be the wife you want me to be anymore." That sentence, more than anything else, hit me like a freight train. It felt like the ultimate rejection, the end of something I had worked so hard to maintain. But I couldn't give up. I couldn't just let it go. Not when our children needed us, not when I still believed in us, even if she didn't. I tried to reason with her, tried to get her to see that we could work through this. But the more I spoke, the more I realized I was speaking to a wall. Emily had already made up her mind. She had already chosen a path that no longer included me, or at least not the man I had been. The realization settled over me like a weight, but I refused to let it crush me. Not yet. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the living room, the quiet echoing through the house. I wasn't sure what to do anymore. I had tried everything I knew, every approach to rebuild what we had, but nothing seemed to work. My role as protector of the family hearth felt like a cruel joke now. My home, once filled with love and laughter, now felt cold, empty. I thought about the baby she wanted so badly. Was this some desperate attempt to salvage something? Or was it just another way to control the situation, to force a connection that wasn't there? Was she truly ready to raise a child, when she couldn't even face the problems in our marriage? The more I thought about it, the more I realized the truth. This wasn't about a baby. This wasn't about fixing anything. It was a manifestation of her deep unhappiness, a need for something outside of herself to fill the void she had created within our relationship. I stood up, pacing the room, my mind racing. I had always been strong, confident, the man who could handle anything. But this was different. I was at a crossroads, and I needed to decide what kind of man I was going to be in this moment. As I sat back down, I realized one painful truth. I couldn't fix this alone. Emily needed to see her own flaws, to face the damage she had done, but I had no control over her actions. The only thing I could do was keep being the man I was, the father, the protector. I would continue to fight for my family, but I couldn't sacrifice myself in the process. I had to let her decide if she wanted to be part of this or not. The decision was now in her hands, and all I could do was wait for her to make it. The days that followed were a strange blur. Emily's unpredictability had reached its peak. One moment she'd be cold and distant, the next she'd try to pull me close with sweet words, but they always felt hollow, like she was trying to convince herself more than me. The emotional whiplash was exhausting. I had always been the strong, confident one, but I felt like I was losing myself in her storms. Despite the mounting tension, I kept myself together. I focused on the kids. I made sure they felt loved, that they could see me standing tall, even if I didn't feel that way inside. They deserved that, even if Emily couldn't give me the same reassurance. I spent my evenings reading them stories, making them laugh, holding them when they cried. I wasn't going to let our family collapse into chaos, even if everything else seemed to be falling apart. But I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling inside me. Something had shifted between Emily and me, something that felt irreparable. Our marriage, which once felt like a strong foundation, now felt fragile and cracked. Every time I reached out to her, tried to connect, it seemed like she pulled further away. It wasn't just the distance either. It was the lies that had slowly crept in, until they built walls so thick I couldn't see her anymore. Every day, I learned something new that made my stomach turn. She'd been texting that same friend more than I was comfortable with. I found an old message on her phone one evening, and though I knew I shouldn't have been snooping, I couldn't help it. The message read, "I'm thinking of leaving him. I need to do what's best for me." My heart sank. Best for me. Those words cut like a knife, as if everything I had done for her, for our family, had been reduced to nothing. It was as if I had been invisible all this time, trying to maintain a family that she was already planning to abandon. I stood in that room for what felt like hours, staring at the message, unable to process what I was reading. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the coldness, the finality in her words. I wasn't even a person to her anymore, just an obstacle she needed to move past. When she returned home that evening, I didn't ask about the message. Instead, I asked her the only question that seemed to matter. "Are we still a family, Emily?" She blinked, surprised by the question, and for a brief moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But it was fleeting, disappearing behind a wall of indifference. "I don't know," she said softly, and her words felt like a death sentence. "I'm not happy, and I don't think we're right for each other anymore." It was as if the ground had been ripped out from under me. Here was the woman I had loved, the mother of my children, telling me that everything we had built was for nothing. I felt the world tilt on its axis, but I couldn't let myself collapse. Not yet. "You can't just throw everything away, Emily," I said, my voice cracking. "I've been trying. I've been fighting for us. But this isn't something I can fix alone." She shrugged, her eyes cold and distant. "I don't know what you want from me. I don't know if I can give you what you need anymore." Her words echoed in my head like a bell tolling. The woman I had once vowed to cherish, the person I had believed would be by my side through thick and thin, was telling me she couldn't even try anymore. And worse, I wasn't sure I could blame her anymore. But I had made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to let her decision ruin everything I had worked for. For the kids, for our home, I had to stay strong. But inside, I was unraveling. That night, I took a long walk outside, my feet crunching on the gravel of our driveway. The cold air hit my face, and for the first time in months, I let myself feel it, really feel it. I felt the bitterness, the loss, the weight of everything crashing down. I thought about the man I had been before, the man I thought I was still, confident, in control, always able to fix things. But now, I wasn't sure what kind of man I was becoming. Was I still the protector, the provider? Or had I become the man who couldn't even protect his own family from itself? I went back inside to find Emily sitting in the kitchen, her face drawn and tired. For a moment, we just stared at each other, two people trapped in a relationship that neither of us knew how to fix. Finally, she broke the silence. "I don't think I can stay here anymore. I think I need space, more space." It felt like a final blow. A baby, a family, a future. I had been working toward all of it, trying to salvage the wreckage of our marriage, but this felt like the end. My instincts told me I couldn't fight her decision, that I had to let her go if she wanted to. But my heart refused to give up. "Please," I said, the words barely a whisper. "I don't want to lose you." Her expression softened for a brief second, but then it was gone, replaced with the same cold detachment. She stood up, grabbed her bag, and walked out the door without another word. And there I was again, alone in the house I once believed would hold us together forever, now nothing more than a hollow shell. The days after Emily left felt like they stretched into eternity. The house, once filled with the laughter of our children and the warmth of shared moments, now echoed with silence. I spent my days in a daze, mechanically going through the motions of life, work, meals, the occasional forced conversation with friends. But nothing felt real anymore. Every corner of the house seemed haunted by her absence, by the broken promises and unspoken truths that lingered in the air. I still took care of the kids as best as I could, trying to shield them from the chaos that seemed to have overtaken their mother and me. They asked where she was, when she would be coming home, and I found myself struggling for an answer that wouldn't break their hearts. I wanted to say that everything would be fine, that Mommy and Daddy were just taking a break, but I knew better than to lie to them. They could sense the tension even if I couldn't find the words to explain it. In the rare moments I allowed myself to truly reflect on everything, it felt like my world was crumbling beneath my feet. Emily had wanted a baby, and I had hoped, maybe foolishly, that it was a step toward healing. But now, I could see it for what it was, a desperate attempt to fill a void, a search for something, anything, that could fix the mess we had become. But a child wasn't a solution. It was an addition to a family already fractured. The realization settled in like cold water. No matter how much I tried to fix things, no matter how much I loved her or how hard I worked, I couldn't change Emily. I couldn't force her to be the woman I needed her to be. That was a painful truth, one I had been avoiding for too long. It wasn't just about the lack of intimacy, though that had stung in ways I couldn't fully articulate. It was the lies, the emotional distance, the way she had treated me, dismissive, sharp, almost cruel at times. I had tried to protect her, to protect our family, but somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of myself. The man I had been, the loving, confident husband, was slipping away, his strength buried beneath the rubble of our broken marriage. And yet, in the midst of the wreckage, something within me refused to give up. I couldn't. For the kids, for the life we had shared, for the family I still believed could be saved, I had to find a way forward. One evening, I sat down with my thoughts, determined to stop simply surviving. I needed a plan, something to regain control of my own life, no matter what Emily decided. I couldn't wait around forever for her to make up her mind, for her to come back, or for the situation to magically resolve itself. I had to start rebuilding. I called my best friend, Lucas, hoping for some guidance. He'd been a constant presence in my life, and though he didn't know all the details of what was going on, he could sense the strain in my voice when I asked him to meet up. We met at a small bar downtown, the kind of place that felt familiar and safe. I hadn't realized how much I missed the comfort of simple conversations, of talking to someone who didn't carry the weight of my problems. "So," Lucas said, as he settled into the booth across from me, a knowing look in his eyes. "How are you really doing?" I paused, the weight of his question hitting me harder than I anticipated. I thought about how much I'd been bottling up, how I had allowed myself to drown in uncertainty. "I don't know anymore," I confessed, rubbing my temples. "I keep wondering what went wrong. I keep asking myself if I could have done more, if I should have seen it coming. But it's like I'm losing myself in all this. And I don't know if I can hold everything together anymore." Lucas leaned back in his chair, his expression soft but firm. "You've been carrying the load for too long, man. I get that. But sometimes, the best thing you can do is step back and look at the bigger picture. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, and you can't keep blaming yourself for things you can't control." I nodded, his words hitting home. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to think about what I needed, not just for the kids, not just for Emily, but for me. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for a relationship that might not be salvageable. "What if she never comes back?" I asked, the question hanging in the air. Lucas shrugged, taking a sip of his beer. "Then you move forward. You're a good man. You'll find a way to create a new path. But it starts with you. What do you want, man?" It was a question I hadn't truly asked myself in a long time. What did I want? Not just for my marriage, but for my life. I couldn't keep waiting around, hoping Emily would change. I had to find my own way, no matter what happened between us. "I want peace," I said quietly. "I want to feel like I'm enough, not just for her, but for me. I want to find who I am again." Lucas nodded, giving me a small smile. "Then go after that. You deserve it." As I left the bar later that night, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't a grand revelation, but it was the start of something. I couldn't control what Emily chose, but I could control how I moved forward. It was time to stop being a victim in my own life. Time to rediscover who I was, and who I wanted to be. I still didn't know where the future would take me, or whether Emily and I could ever find our way back to each other. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was on the right path, even if it meant walking it alone for a while. The days after my conversation with Lucas felt like the beginning of a new chapter, one I wasn't sure I was ready for, but one I knew I had to face. It was strange, almost surreal. I had spent so much time trying to patch together a marriage that felt increasingly beyond repair, trying to hold onto the pieces of something that had long since fractured, that I had almost forgotten what it meant to focus on myself. I threw myself into work even more, not as an escape, but as a way to regain some semblance of control. I threw myself into the gym as well, pushing my body to its limits. I realized I had let so much slip in the chaos of the past few months, my health, my mental state, my confidence, and now it was time to reclaim all of it. But no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I tried to focus on the practical things, Emily's absence weighed on me. The kids were handling it surprisingly well, but I knew they felt the void. They missed her, as children would. It was impossible not to. It wasn't until a week later that Emily came back to the house. It wasn't for good. She was just picking up some of her things, and she seemed distant, cold as ever. She barely even acknowledged my presence, and I didn't know how to read that. Was she here to try and make things right, or was this just a formality? Can we talk? I asked as she moved toward the door, a bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't look at me at first. She just continued collecting her things, until finally, she turned and met my gaze. What is there to talk about, Ryan? Her voice was quiet but sharp. You already made it clear that you're done. I blinked, taken aback. What are you talking about? I've never said I was done. I just want us to figure this out. I want to fix what's broken. Emily's lips curled into a humorless smile. You can't fix me, Ryan. You can't fix what's already beyond saving. The words hit harder than I expected. I had known deep down that things weren't okay between us, but hearing her say that it was beyond saving, felt like a gut punch. I tried to remain composed. I can't fix everything, but I can try. I can do better. But I need you to try too. I can't keep doing this alone. She sighed, looking away as if she couldn't bear to see me standing there, pleading with her. I've tried, Ryan. I've tried for years, and I can't do it anymore. I can't keep living in a marriage that feels so empty. Her words felt final. The finality of it hit me in waves. I had been so focused on trying to protect her, trying to hold our family together, that I hadn't realized how much I was losing myself in the process. It was a painful truth I had to accept. Emily didn't want to try anymore. A part of me wanted to scream, to tell her how much she had hurt me, how much I was still fighting for us. But in that moment, I realized something that struck me to my core. There was no winning this fight. She had already decided. She had already chosen her path. I don't know what to say anymore, I finally said, my voice breaking, but I couldn't help it. I've given everything I had to you, and I don't know where that leaves us. She looked at me, and for the first time in months, I saw something that resembled pity in her eyes. Maybe it leaves us where we need to be. Maybe it leaves us apart. I didn't have the strength to argue. I simply watched her as she turned and walked out the door. As she left, something in me shattered. I thought I had prepared for it, that I was ready for the end of everything we once were, but nothing could prepare me for that moment. I stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the empty space where she had been, and for the first time, I allowed myself to feel the weight of it all. The end of a marriage. The end of a dream. The following days were a blur of numbness. I continued to take care of the kids, to go through the motions, but inside, I was unraveling. I had always believed that love and commitment could overcome anything, but now, I wasn't sure if that was true. I had given so much of myself to this marriage, but in the end, I couldn't make her love me the way I needed. I couldn't help but think about what had happened, about all the lies, all the distance. Emily had been so quick to move on, so quick to decide that I wasn't worth fighting for. But I couldn't dwell on that. I had to keep going. For the kids. For myself. Late one night, as I lay in bed, I heard a soft knock on the door. My heart raced. I didn't know who it could be. But when I opened it, there she stood, Emily. She was holding a small envelope in her hand, and she looked different. Not quite the woman I had known, but not the cold stranger I had seen last time either. Can we talk? She asked, her voice quiet and unsure. The uncertainty in her eyes made something shift in me. Despite everything, despite the hurt, I still loved her. But this was a new moment. A moment where I had to decide what I could give, and what I couldn't anymore. I nodded slowly, stepping aside to let her in. As Emily stepped into the room, there was a heaviness between us, something unspoken that lingered in the air. I couldn't quite place it, whether it was regret, sadness, or something else, but whatever it was, it made my chest tighten. The kids were asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware of the tension that seemed to hang over the house. She stood there for a moment, her eyes darting around the room, as though searching for the right words. I could feel the weight of everything we hadn't said pressing on both of us. Ryan, she began, her voice shaky. I've been thinking a lot about everything. I didn't know how to respond. After all the hurt, the lies, and the distance, I wasn't sure what she was going to say. Was she here to ask for forgiveness? To tell me it was too late? Or was this just another fleeting moment where she'd say something to make herself feel better, before walking away again? You've been thinking? I asked, my voice quiet but sharp. What exactly have you been thinking, Emily? Because for the past few months, you've been so distant, I didn't know if you even cared anymore. She winced at my words, and I immediately regretted how they came out. But it was too late. The bitterness had seeped into my tone, and I couldn't hide it. I wasn't angry anymore, though, just resigned. It was as if I had spent so much time trying to fix things that I had forgotten to take care of myself. I had been running on fumes, trying to fix a marriage that had already come undone. Emily let out a long breath, her hand shaking slightly as she held the envelope. "I know I've hurt you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I know I've pushed you away more times than I can count. But I never wanted to destroy what we had. I don't know how to fix it anymore." Her words felt like a dam had broken open, and for the first time in months, I saw vulnerability in her. I saw the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who had once stood by me through thick and thin. She wasn't the cold, indifferent version of herself that had pulled away so many times. She was a woman lost, unsure of how to heal herself, let alone the wreckage between us. "I don't know if I can fix it either," I said softly, sitting down on the couch, my hands running through my hair. "But I need to know something, Emily. Is there any part of you left in this? Or am I just holding on to something that's already gone?" She stepped forward, slowly sitting beside me. She didn't say anything for a long while, and I waited, giving her the space she needed to gather her thoughts. The silence between us wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't suffocating either. It was the kind of silence that allowed both of us to reflect on everything that had led us here. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't know if I can give you the love you need anymore. I don't know if I can be the woman you want me to be. But I miss the way we used to be. I miss us, Ryan." I looked at her, trying to read her expression. There was so much pain in her eyes, so much regret. But there was also something else. A flicker of hope, maybe? Or was it just the familiarity of the past, a longing for something that had been lost? I couldn't tell. "I miss us too," I whispered, feeling the knot in my throat tighten. "But I don't know if I can keep pretending that everything's okay. We've been pretending for so long, Emily. And it's killing me." She reached out, her hand brushing mine. The touch was gentle, almost apologetic. "I know," she said softly. "I don't expect things to magically fix themselves. I know I've done a lot of damage. But I want to try. I want to try to find a way back to each other. Even if it means starting over from the beginning." I stared at her, uncertain. Could I really go back? Could I let go of all the anger, all the hurt, and trust her again? Could I open myself up to the possibility of healing, knowing that I might get hurt again? "I don't know if I can trust you again, Emily," I said, my voice low. "I've been so hurt by you, by everything that's happened. It's hard for me to believe that you want to fix this." "I understand," she said quietly. "But I need you to know that I'm not asking for forgiveness right now. I'm asking for a chance. Just a chance to prove to you that I still care, that I still want us. We don't have to make any decisions tonight. But can we try? Can we try to find a way back to each other?" I looked at her, torn between my desire to protect myself and the part of me that still loved her, the part of me that still wanted to believe in us. The part of me that believed love, even after everything, could still be worth fighting for. For the first time in months, I felt something stir inside me. A spark. A flicker of hope that I thought I had lost forever. "Maybe we can try," I said finally, my voice soft but steady. "Maybe we can find a way back. But it's going to take time. And it's going to take more than just words. I need to see that you're willing to fight for this too." Emily nodded, her eyes filled with something like relief. Or maybe it was the beginning of a new understanding. "I'll fight for it. I'll fight for us." I wasn't sure what the future held, but in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't ready to give up just yet. We had both hurt each other, but we were still standing. And maybe that was enough to give us the chance to rebuild what we had lost.